Bluejay Mining is making an acquisition, broadening its strategy, and changing its name. I'm delighted to be joined by the non-executive director, Rod McIlwraith. So, Rod, this acquisition with White Flame Energy, what was the rationale?
Morning, Sarah. Thank you. Look, the Bluejay was looking for a couple of needle-moving projects. Things that I guess has happened over the last couple of years was the work that went on with Dundas didn't really, given the current price of the commodity, give a project that was going to be financeable in the short term. I think what ended up happening there was we needed ultimately, at the current price, it made money, but it really needed $280 ilmenite price to get it off the ground. With that in mind, Dundas being the key project and Disco under joint venture with Cobalt, and we'll come to that in a sec, I guess, the company itself needed something that it fully owned, if that makes sense. White Flame, as it's now known, is owned by a couple of the directors. It's a private company. It's been in existence for about 10 years. It was the original applicant for the licenses in an open tender that was international open tender, actually, back in 2014. So the transaction is a fairly streamlined one. Shareholders are getting a good deal here because everybody wants this to work. White Flame has spent historically £4 million on this project just within that 10-year period. And prior to that, it's had, north of $100 million spent on it. So it's quite a tangible thing. And I think when shareholders fully digest that ream of information that they've just received this morning, I think that hopefully they'll agree with us.
So you mentioned 2014 there. Are the licenses still relevant? And how much is this costing investors now in 2024?
Sure. Yeah, look, there's no actual day-to-day work commitment for these licenses. You have a series of deliverables that you have to provide the regulator at the end of the sub-period. So it might be worth just sort of explaining how the license is broken up at the moment. It's a 10-year license. They are exploration and exploitation licenses. Now, these are something that we worked with the Greenland government back in, when was it, sort of 2012, 13, and then 14, when they did the international tender. We introduced them to the regulators in Australia. They took counsel from Norway, and they put together what was the first of its kind in terms of a framework for licensing and exploitation for onshore oil. And once they had that framework in place, the Greenland government passed that as legislation, and they threw out an international tender. I think because of our familiarity with the project leading up to that, because we sort of did identify it as a potential license, but there was no application form to take out a license, if you like. So over that 2012, 2014 was the bit, as I said, we worked with the regulators. And I think that, we had a very advanced understanding of the project. There was a lot of historical information that we had assimilated. We purchased that from the Danish Geological Survey, Danish and Greenlandic Geological Survey, and subsequently went out and did a number of surveys, reinterpreted a lot of that information, provided a new set of airborne surveys, local surface testing, etc. And that first sub-period, which is three years, because of COVID and because of other, general economic climates and for a number of reasons, we were able to have extended for an additional 7 years. So that first 3-year period ended up being 10. We still have a 3-year period to go in sub-period 2, and sub-period 4 is notionally when we're supposed to do sub-period 3 is a 4-year license. Notionally, that's when we're supposed to drill. So yeah, look, it's been a long process, but I think where we are now with the project is sort of, it's almost a drill ready on some big target potential. We're looking for a number of things here. This is the headline, obviously, is the industrial gases, helium, hydrogen, white hydrogen. xenon, neon, etc. There is natural gas there, and there is quite a lot of liquid hydrocarbons. Originally, it was a liquid hydrocarbon project. Essentially, what Jameson is, if you could visualize when Norway and Greenland were once one landmass and the North Atlantic Ridge went through there and separated those two countries, that created the North Sea. And half of that basin is expressed onshore on the east coast of Greenland. And that's what Jameson is. It's interesting, you can wander around there in some places and you can find dinosaur footprints in the mud, just that surface. It's quite extraordinary. It is truly prehistoric when you get onto this landscape.
So the Jameson Basin has the footprints of previous dynasties, as it were. Who else are the neighbours? Who are you rubbing shoulders with? Who else is interested in those footprints?
Yeah, so there's a company called Pulsar Helium. They're adjacent to us. They're on the outer edge on a property called Liverpool Land. Their licenses adjoin ours. Our licenses, I think from memory, about 8,800 or thereabouts square kilometres. I think theirs are around about half that or something of that magnitude. They are industrial gas players specifically. They're after hydrogen, helium and hydrogen. To the north and the south, we have a lot of mineral companies. There's not, I guess there's not a gas exploration industry as such in Greenland, mainly because there's not a lot of soft rock up there that, you know, it's such as the Jameson area. But it is still sort of fairly much in its infancy as well. I mean, the Pulsar Helium guys, to their credit, worked with the Greenland government to put in place a framework for industrial gases, which subsequently allowed them to license their area. We had a license existing on the Jameson property that incorporated these gases already. As I said, it's an exploration and an exploitation license. So these licenses actually give us the right, should we find something, to be able to mine it. And that's a very, well, to extract it, I think is probably more accurate. So that's a very important point. Yeah, so look, there's quite a bit of work to do there, Sarah, but you know, at some point, our objective there, I think it's probably worth getting out here. Our objective there is to try and find a partner that can assist us with some of the cost over this next 3-year period. Greenland government has just renewed this first sub period for an additional 3 years a couple of months ago. And that's the catalyst, I think, that has allowed us to do this transaction.
So, Rod, I'm quite sure that some investors share my concerns about a recent announcement by the government of Greenland. It announced it would not be issuing any further exclusive oil licenses. So what does that mean and how does this impact you?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, Sarah. I mean, it's something that did create a little bit of uncertainty, even with us as the license holder at the time. I think that decision needs to be taken within the context of what was going on in the world at that point. A lot of countries around the world were not announced that they weren't going to be issuing any future licenses for hydrocarbons. They were going to try and, you know, net zero was what we're all trying to achieve here. We wrote to the Greenland government not long after that announcement was made public. And important to note here, that's not legislation. This is just a government position that they're not going to issue in the future any new licenses for exploration of oil. We wrote to the government and they wrote back to us and said, no, this is everything that has been issued to date will be honoured. Your licenses are in good standing. That position has been further reinforced by the fact that our licenses have just been extended for a further 3 years in the last couple of months, which was really the catalyst for this transaction. And secondly, the licenses themselves are exploration and exploitation licenses. So what that means is what we have a 10-year period for an exploration license that I described as being broken down into 3 sub-periods. If during that time we fulfill the prerequisites of an environmental or social impact assessment, make a discovery, which is critical in these situations, then we have the legal right to be able to exploit it. Now, this is the only onshore license that has ever been issued in Greenland. So technically, it's far less challenging than some of these offshore activities that we saw historically with groups like Cairn Energy or, just trying to try to drill some holes, the North Sea, the Barents, the Arctic. So there is a lot of byproduct as well in these licenses, the industrial gases, which is really kind of one of the reasons we're here as well. So I think that people can take comfort in the fact that this is a very transparent and clear legal framework that we're dealing with here. This is Greenland, which is by default, a Danish territory, lives under the Danish legal system. These licenses are issued, they're in good standing. There's nothing to worry about there. We're looking forward to working on them.
But I'm going to go back to, so it's exploitation and exploration, but what is this all costing investors? Because they're wading through this 20-page document that you released this week. What is the low-hanging fruit? What it will give investors confidence that they'll get pretty swiftish returns?
Yeah, look, this is something that still has a little bit of desktop study left to do in terms of just dialing in on the resolution of some of these anomalies. We could drill these at any time, subject to the completion of sort of standard precursor documents. You've got to do a small social impact assessment for the local area, a exploration version of a environmental impact assessment, which is a sort of a half qualification of a larger report. Ultimately, to drill holes here will be expensive. There's no doubt about that. But what we have is 3 years with which to do it. So upon this acquisition, there's no immediate requirements to spend anything. In actual fact, should we get to the end of the 3-year period and not spend anything, all that would happen would be we would lose the licenses. Now, that's obviously not ideal, but I think that what our next steps will be to promote and educate the industry that this opportunity exists. There's 3 major projects in Greenland in my mind. Jameson is probably the largest out of all of them in terms of potential contained value, right? And Disco and another project called Kavanafel, which is a rare earth uranium project on the southern tip, are probably, broadly speaking, Disco would be more value because it's larger, or potentially it will be larger. So, Bluejay really has 2 of those 3 projects now, being the best things that Greenland has on offer. So, look, I think baby steps at first. Maybe bring in a partner. I'm not saying we will or we won't. Maybe someone likes the RNS and contacts us and says, look, we'll help you guys with the cost to drill some holes for X% or something. So no decisions have been made on that, but I think the quality of the project speaks for itself, and it will attract the right people at the right time.
Obviously, any joint venture partners will be doing their due diligence, and they'll be looking at ownership, not just from a retail investor perspective. And I'm just thinking about the director crossover. How clean is the White Flame Energy transaction in terms of personalities and management involved? Could you defend yourselves against allegations of feathering your nest, or is this transaction pretty standard practice within the mining industry?
Well, I think, earlier in the conversation, I sort of referenced that this is actually a pretty good deal for Bluejay shareholders. And I think on a number of metrics, whether it be historical expenditure, the cost to get the licenses, the amount of work that White Flame has done refining all of those things, and ultimately the acquisition price of £2.5 million for 100%. Is not onerous at all on Bluejay shareholders. And we did it specifically for that purpose because, as you said, there are common directors. Mike, myself, and Eric are both involved on both sides. So we can't vote on this transaction. So if people are unhappy with it, it'll actually be pretty easy to vote out because, the largest shareholders are stepping away and letting everybody else make the decision here. But I think I think on the balance of probabilities, everyone's going to recognise that this is a pretty good deal, Sarah.
So, Rod, this is all sounding very interesting. But from speaking to you and the rest of the board last year, I thought that Bluejay had more of a copper weighted mandate. It seems as
Mm.
though the business structure is quite fluid.
Look, where we have taken the position that we are focusing on a couple of things. Copper certainly is on the table there. Three of our projects actually are very copper focused. We've got the ex-state-owned Hammaslahti mine in Finland. We have the recently announced organically grown copper license in Tule, and we also have Disco. Disco is something that we are working to get a handle on the timeline for next year, and we're very optimistic about everything there. I know it's been a difficult year. We came in to the company late in the process to get work done in 2024. But the gas and natural gas and liquid hydrocarbons side of it, really, this was just an opportunity for two things, really. Turning Bluejay around was the core focus because no one wanted to see this thing, wither on the vine, so to speak. And the project, the White Flame project, contains a lot of industrial gas at a time when industrial gas is on ever increasing demand. So, I mean, these things have fit together quite well. I know they kind of, if you step back and you think, oh, oil, industrial gas, natural gas, and copper, but it's never been done before. So let's see what happens.
And finally, the name change, 80 Mile. 80 Mile to me sounds a little bit insignificant. So why?
Yeah, look, it was just something. It's over the horizon, isn't it? What's over there? It's sort of a forward-looking name. There is a beach in Australia that's the 80 Mile Beach. Of course, there could be a reference to that. Who knows? But yeah, look, I think it was just time now with these portfolio amendments to freshen up the decor, and a new name is part of that process. So, I think that was sort of a consensus-driven decision, the 80 Mile, choosing the 80 Mile name. I quite like it, actually. I think it's going to stick. Code 80M. It's not a bad one.
Many thanks. Well, good luck with the interior decorating, to use a
Thank you, Sarah.
metaphor. It's been a pleasure talking to Rod McKilrie, Non-Executive Director of Bluejay Mining, soon to be 80 Mile. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks. Bye-bye.